The world rarely watches Burkina Faso. It is not a country that dominates global headlines with stock market surges or billion-dollar tech listings. It does not command attention in oil markets or control critical maritime choke points. For decades, it has existed at the margins of global economic narratives. Landlocked, resource-dependent, politically fragile, and frequently defined more by instability than ambition. And yet, in late 2025, something unusual began unfolding in the red dust between Wagadugu and Bobo Dioulasso. Bulldozers moved with speed, survey teams advanced in disciplined lines, entire communities gathered to clear brush and mark alignments. Within weeks of its launch on December 15th, more than two-thirds of a 332-kilometer highway corridor had already been cleared. No grand foreign consortium dominated the headlines. No elaborate debt announcement overshadowed the project's launch. What emerged instead was something more subtle and potentially more consequential. A landlocked Sahelian state, long defined by fragility, was attempting to rewire its own economic geography. The Wagadugu Bobo Highway is, on its surface, an infrastructure project. But beneath the asphalt lies a strategic question. Can Burkina Faso alter its developmental trajectory by physically reshaping the relationship between its political capital and its economic engine? The world may not be watching closely, but perhaps it should. To understand why this highway carries such weight, one must first understand the structure it seeks to change. Burkina Faso's economic geography was never designed for internal cohesion. During the colonial era under French administration, infrastructure was built outward, not inward. Railways and roads were laid to extract cotton and other agricultural outputs toward coastal ports in what is now Côte d'Ivoire. The logic was extractive efficiency, not national integration. After independence in 1960, that inherited structure remained largely intact. Political authority concentrated in Wagadugu. Economic dynamism gravitated toward Bobo Dioulasso, historically a commercial hub with cross-border trading networks and agricultural linkages. Yet the connective tissue between the two cities never evolved into a high-capacity corridor capable of driving industrial integration. Instead, transport relied on aging road networks vulnerable to seasonal degradation. Logistics costs remained high, travel times unpredictable. Informal trade filled gaps left by weak formal systems. Burkina Faso became emblematic of a structural paradox common across parts of West Africa. Productive potential constrained not by absence of effort, but by absence of connective infrastructure. Over decades, this dynamic compounded itself. The economy diversified modestly. Gold mining rose in prominence during the 2000s, turning Burkina Faso into one of Africa's significant gold producers. Cotton retained importance, but industrial transformation remained limited. Manufacturing clusters struggled to scale without efficient transport arteries linking raw materials, labor pools, and domestic markets. Infrastructure was not merely an economic deficiency, it became a political symbol. Large-scale projects frequently stalled. Announcements outpaced execution. External financing often shaped timelines more than domestic coordination did. Against that backdrop, the rapid clearing of over 230 kilometers of highway corridor in mere weeks sends a message beyond engineering efficiency. It signals an attempt to redefine the state's capacity to execute. Execution is political power made visible. The Ouagadougou Bobo corridor connects more than two cities. It links two different functional identities within the country. Ouagadougou is the administrative center, the seat of government, ministries, and national institutions. It is where policy is drafted and authority is consolidated. Bobo Dioulasso, by contrast, has long served as a commercial gateway. It connects to agricultural zones and regional trade routes extending toward Mali, Côte d'Ivoire, and beyond. It carries economic weight disproportionate to its political visibility. But when travel between these poles is slow and costly, fragmentation follows. Markets function semi-independently, price disparities widen, supply chains elongate inefficiently. Investment hesitates. A modern highway compresses geography. It reduces time. It lowers per-unit transport costs. It increases predictability. For businesses, especially in agriculture, light manufacturing, and mining services, predictability is currency. The significance of this 332-kilometer project therefore lies in its potential multiplier effects. Lower transport costs could stimulate inter-city trade. Faster movement of goods may incentivize agro-processing closer to production zones. Construction itself injects employment and demand into surrounding communities. Over time, roadside commercial activity typically emerges: fuel stations, logistics depots, our warehousing, small retail clusters. Infrastructure corridors often become development corridors, but such outcomes are not automatic. They depend on governance, maintenance capacity, security stability, and complementary policies. This is where Burkina Faso's broader political landscape complicates the narrative. The country has experienced significant political turbulence in recent years. Coups, security challenges linked to armed insurgencies, and shifting alliances have defined its recent trajectory. Large swathes of territory have faced insecurity, affecting agricultural production and internal displacement. In such an environment, infrastructure projects carry dual symbolism. They can represent resilience and forward momentum. They can also become vulnerable assets if security deteriorates. The rapid progress reported along the Wagadugu to Bobo corridor suggests a deliberate effort by authorities to project control and administrative discipline. The visible synchronization between technical teams and community participation reinforces a narrative of national mobilization rather than purely top-down execution. Community involvement in clearing sections of the route is more than cost-saving pragmatism. It fosters ownership. When residents help shape infrastructure, the project becomes embedded in local identity rather than perceived as imposed abstraction. National unity, however, cannot be engineered solely through asphalt. It requires sustained political inclusion and economic opportunity. That is where the structural shift becomes most interesting. Across Africa, infrastructure has re-emerged as a central instrument of statecraft. From Ethiopia's industrial parks to Kenya's standard gauge railway, from Egypt's new administrative capital to Nigeria's refinery ambitions, governments are attempting to alter structural constraints through capital-intensive projects. Burkina Faso's highway is smaller in scale compared to megaprojects elsewhere, yet its strategic logic aligns with a broader continental recalibration. Internal integration first, external leverage second. Landlocked states face inherent disadvantages. Without direct access to seaports, they rely on neighbors' infrastructure and political stability. Trade corridors become lifelines. Delays at borders translate into inflationary pressure. Currency vulnerabilities intensify when export logistics falter. A reliable, high-capacity corridor between Wagadugu and Bobo Dioulasso enhances Burkina Faso's ability to coordinate internal supply chains before engaging external ones. It strengthens its negotiating position in regional trade frameworks. It potentially reduces transport costs for exports moving toward coastal routes. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, now operational, further amplifies the importance of internal corridors. Tariff reductions mean little if trucks cannot move efficiently across national and domestic borders. Infrastructure thus becomes geopolitical leverage at a regional level. Yet ambition carries risk. Large infrastructure projects, particularly in lower-income economies, often involve substantial financing commitments. Debt sustainability becomes central. If financing terms are opaque or repayment assumptions overly optimistic, infrastructure can morph from catalyst to constraint. Burkina Faso's fiscal space has historically been limited. Public revenues depend significantly on commodities, especially gold. Commodity price volatility can compress budgets rapidly. If project costs escalate beyond expectations or maintenance expenses are underestimated, fiscal stress may intensify. Maintenance is frequently the silent vulnerability of African infrastructure. Roads degrade faster in climates marked by heavy seasonal rains and extreme heat. Without disciplined maintenance funding, newly constructed highways can deteriorate within a decade. Governance risk also looms. Infrastructure corridors generate land value appreciation. Without transparent land management frameworks, an elite capture can distort benefits. Informal settlements may proliferate without urban planning, complicating future expansion. Then there is the resource curse dynamic. Burkina Faso's gold sector has expanded significantly over the past 2 decades. Mining revenues provide foreign exchange and fiscal resources, but resource-dependent economies often struggle to translate extractive wealth into diversified industrial growth. If the highway merely accelerates mineral exports without catalyzing domestic processing, its transformative potential diminishes. Execution discipline during construction must be matched by policy discipline afterward. The global chessboard adds another layer. Major powers have recalibrated their African engagement in recent years. China's infrastructure financing footprint remains substantial, though more selective than during the early 2000s. The European Union has launched global gateway initiatives. The United States has signaled renewed interest in strategic minerals critical to energy transition technologies. Russia has expanded security partnerships across parts of the Sahel. Burkina Faso sits in a region where security partnerships and resource diplomacy intersect. Gold remains a strategic asset. Beyond gold, the Sahel region holds potential for other minerals relevant to global supply chains. As the energy transition accelerates, demand for critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, manganese, rare earth elements, has intensified. While Burkina Faso is not currently a dominant producer of many of these, exploration continues across West Africa. Infrastructure corridors enhance the feasibility of future mining and processing investments. Investors assess not only geological potential but logistical viability. A reliable highway reduces one layer of uncertainty. At the same time, geopolitical competition introduces pressure. External partners may seek influence through financing or security cooperation tied implicitly or explicitly to infrastructure development. Maintaining sovereignty in such an environment requires careful calibration. Over-reliance on any single external actor can narrow strategic options. Conversely, excessive fragmentation of partnerships can dilute coherence. The symbolism of the Wagadugu to Bobo Highway as an expression of self-determination therefore resonates beyond domestic audiences. It signals a desire to demonstrate internal capacity rather than external dependency. Perception matters. International investors track signals of administrative competence. Rapid early progress, if sustained transparently, can shift risk assessments incrementally. Security remains the underlying variable. Infrastructure cannot function in isolation from territorial stability. Armed groups operating in parts of the Sahel have targeted transport routes in the past. Ensuring the long-term security of a 332-kilometer corridor requires coordinated defense, intelligence, and community engagement strategies. Yet infrastructure itself can contribute to stabilization. Economic activity along corridors can create employment. Improved mobility can enhance state presence. Markets expand, reducing isolation of peripheral regions. The relationship between security and development is circular rather than linear. Each influences the other. Youth demographics intensify the urgency. Burkina Faso, like many African countries, has a young and rapidly growing population. Youth unemployment or underemployment generates social pressure. Infrastructure construction provides temporary jobs, but sustainable employment requires industrial ecosystems. If the highway attracts agro-processing plants, logistics firms, construction material industries, and service clusters, employment multipliers may follow. If not, expectations may outpace reality. Expectation management is political strategy. 3 plausible futures emerge. In the first scenario, the highway becomes a strategic breakthrough. Construction remains disciplined. Maintenance frameworks are institutionalized. Complementary policies encourage industrial clustering along the corridor. Security stabilizes sufficiently to allow consistent economic activity. Over time, the Wagadugu to Bobo axis evolves into a spine of domestic integration, reducing internal price disparities and fostering mid-scale manufacturing. Regional trade expands. Investor perception gradually shifts. Burkina Faso does not transform overnight, but its structural constraints loosen. In the second scenario, progress plateaus. The road is completed, but maintenance funding proves inconsistent. Security challenges intermittently disrupt traffic. Industrial policy remains fragmented. The corridor functions adequately but does not catalyze broader transformation. Economic growth continues at modest rates, tied heavily to commodity cycles. The highway becomes useful infrastructure rather than transformative infrastructure. The third scenario carries greater risk. Political instability intensifies. Fiscal pressures mount, constraining maintenance and complementary investments. Security incidents target transport flows. Land disputes arise along the corridor. The project's symbolism erodes as implementation gaps widen. In such a context, the highway may still stand physically, but its economic multiplier effects diminish sharply. Which path unfolds depends less on asphalt quality and more on institutional continuity. The deeper question underlying the Wagadugu Bobo project is whether Burkina Faso can shift from reactive governance to strategic sequencing. Strategic sequencing involves prioritizing infrastructure that unlocks multiple sectors simultaneously. It requires aligning fiscal policy, land management, industrial incentives, security frameworks, and regional diplomacy. Highways alone do not industrialize economies, but without highways, industrialization rarely scales. For landlocked states, internal integration is foundational. Once domestic markets cohere, external competitiveness strengthens. The corridor between the political center and economic hub thus serves as both artery and signal. Signal to citizens that progress is tangible. Signal to neighbors that ambition exists. Signal to investors that execution is possible. Signals must be reinforced by outcomes. As the sun sets over the Sahel, the image of cleared red earth stretching toward the horizon carries quiet symbolism. It is not the spectacle of skyscrapers or megacities. It is simpler, perhaps more fundamental. A road. A deliberate attempt to compress distance in a country where distance has long shaped destiny. The world may still not be watching closely, but infrastructure often reveals shifts before headlines do. When landlocked states begin to integrate internally with discipline and speed, the implications unfold gradually, through trade flows, through migration patterns, through industrial decisions made quietly in boardrooms far away. Burkina Faso's first major highway is not a guarantee of transformation. It is an opening move. Whether it becomes a foundation for economic resilience or a standalone achievement depends on what follows. On governance, security, fiscal prudence, and sustained coordination. In geopolitics, power is often measured in ports, pipelines, and production statistics. But sometimes it is measured in something more modest: the capacity to build, consistently and competently, across one's own terrain. Between Wagadugu and Bobo Dioulasso, that test is now underway. And for a country long defined by structural constraints, the act of building may itself be the beginning of redefinition.